Hey everybody, and welcome back. I'm Lindsay, and on this channel I talk about functional medicine, natural living, and more. Today's topic is going to be 10 tips for eating for your microbiome and how to choose a probiotic. If you've watched any of my other videos before, you've heard me say that I've been told multiple times through my own health journey that what I ate did not affect my health. Nothing could be further from the truth. If you watch my video on the microbiome, you know how important that is for the overall body's health. And so naturally, what we eat is going to have a significant impact on the microbiome itself. So here are my top 10 tips to eat to support the microbiome health. No matter if you have an underlying diagnosis or not, my number one tip is always going to be focus on whole food nutrition. The overwhelming majority of your diet should come from whole foods. And if you're not sure what exactly constitutes a whole food, a simple way to categorize that is if it came from the ground or has a mother, it is considered to be a whole food. If you can consume it in its original form, it is a whole food. That is one very easy way to qualify what counts as whole foods. And this should be the majority of your diet for many reasons, but I think the most important reason is that whole foods are nutritionally balanced. They're naturally loaded with fiber, micronutrients. They meet all the goals of the necessary macronutrients that you need, and they're designed to support your body. My second tip is to stay hydrated. This means drinking 8 to 10 glasses of water and or electrolytes per day. That is so important that you stay hydrated. If you watched my video last week, I discussed how staying hydrated can help improve digestion, and the same goes here. By staying hydrated, you're able to keep the body moving appropriately. You're able to give your body what it needs, and it helps to keep stool soft and ready to pass in a reasonable time, which helps you to eliminate toxins appropriately. Tip number 3 is going to be including high fiber foods in your diet. High fiber foods include things like fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, beans, whole grains. Those are all things that will provide a significant amount of fiber in your diet. You should strive to get at least 25 grams of fiber per day. That can seem overwhelming and takes intentionality. So even if you think that you're eating enough fruits and vegetables, you likely are not. So try to incorporate more high fiber foods in your day. High fiber foods increase the gut microbe variety, as well as produce metabolites called short chain fatty acids that are essential for digestion and for synthesis of other things in your body. High fiber foods also bulk up the stool in order to increase the transit time for your bowel movements, which, as I just mentioned, helps to eliminate toxins. And consumption of high fiber foods has been linked to less weight gain over time because they tend to make you feel more satisfied and more full. So people tend to eat less food overall if you're consuming a lot of high fiber foods at each meal. You also want to be consuming prebiotic and probiotic foods. You've probably heard of probiotics, but prebiotics are the foods that feed the good gut bacteria that you need to stay healthy. Prebiotic foods include things like garlic, onions, asparagus, leeks, apples, bananas, oats, honey, flaxseed. Those are just some that I can name off the top of my head, but those are great sources of prebiotic fiber that would help to feed the good bacteria. Probiotics are going to be the actual microbes themselves, and you can get these through food or through supplements. If you choose to get them through food, you'll want to include fermented food like sourdough, sauerkraut, miso, kimchi, Yogurt with active cultures, those are all some examples of fermented food that contain probiotics. If you want to know more about using and choosing a probiotic supplement, I will address that at the end of this video. My fifth tip is to avoid anything that you know you are sensitive to. Now, this seems like common sense, but there are a lot of people who know, for example, they don't tolerate dairy well, but they continue to consume it because they like it. But let me tell you, that is a one-way relationship. You might like dairy, but it doesn't like you, and it's best to break up with it as soon as possible if that's the case. If you're unsure what foods are causing you trouble, definitely seek help from a functional medicine provider who can help you and guide you through food sensitivity testing that is high quality and reputable, because there are many options available out there that are not necessarily as quality as others. Even if it's only for a short time while you're doing an elimination diet, you'll need to remove any trigger foods in order to promote healing of the microbiome. Number 6, avoid refined sugar and flour. This is really tough because sugar and flour are basically in everything, but they are pro-inflammatory, and actually consuming large amounts of sugar on a regular basis inhibit a protein that is needed to populate the good bacteria in your gut. So sugar has a negative impact on the microbiome. Number 7 is consider implementing intermittent fasting. Now, this is a trendy topic. You may have heard about it on other podcasts or channels, but I highly recommend it as a strategy that can be used safely for most people in order to help to balance the microbiome. The next one is to avoid artificial sweeteners. Now, a lot of people like their artificial sweeteners because they say in theory they don't raise blood sugars as much, but in lab studies, artificial sweeteners have been linked to changes in the microbiome that actually contribute to insulin resistance, which we know is a root cause for many diseases in the body and a lot of metabolic insufficiency. So you want to avoid artificial sugars like the plague. Number 9 might be new to a lot of you, but it is to remove chemical emulsifiers. Now, these are things that you will only know are present by reading labels. These are things like maltodextrin, carrageenan, polysorbate 80. These are chemical agents designed to thicken food. They're typically found in processed meats, rotisserie chickens, salad dressings, creamy sauces, things like that. So definitely avoid these in your diet if at all possible, because they trigger chronic inflammation in the gut. And we know, like insulin resistance, inflammation is the main driver for a lot of disease in the body. And inflammation in your gut is very problematic. And always reduce your stress. This is something that can seem impossible to a lot of people because stress seems unavoidable in our modern, very fast-paced lifestyles, but stress negatively impacts the microbiome in major ways. So whatever it is that you need to do to find some de-stressing techniques, I highly recommend that you work on those as soon as possible. This could be deep breathing, meditation, prayer, stretching, walking, reducing screen time. I know there's a lot of stress-induced, what they call doom scrolling, where people get sucked into social media feeds and then perpetuate anxiety, which causes stress, which causes damage to the microbiome. So whatever tools you find helpful to manage stress, make sure you're incorporating them on a regular basis to mitigate the damage that it is doing to your body. Now, of course, this is not an exclusive list, but this is a general list that pretty much anybody can implement with just a few lifestyle modifications. As always, I take a food first approach, and so these are things that you can try just by swapping out what you are purchasing at the grocery store or what you're eating in general. The second part of this video is designed to help give some general guidelines on how to choose probiotic supplements. The probiotic supplements are very important for nutrition, for immune health, for digestion. They can be very key in microbiome recovery after antibiotic use or long-term steroid use. I would personally recommend them if you're taking birth control, as that definitely alters the microbiome as well. But it can be overwhelming. How do you choose? If you go to the store or to the drugstore, or if you go onto Amazon, you're literally bombarded with so many options. And let me tell you, they are not all created equally. So I'm going to give you some general tips and guidelines if you decide to take a probiotic of how to choose. Number one is to consider the CFU. Now you'll see this next to the number on the packaging, and this stands for colony forming units. So this is essentially like the organism count, and generally for children you want 5 billion to 10 billion CFUs per day, and for adults you want 10 to 20 billion CFUs per day at least. It doesn't mean that more necessarily is better, but you want at least that many. Generally speaking, refrigerated probiotics are generally a sign of quality, though it's not required. There are more shelf-stable options coming out all the time, and so some shelf-stable items are okay, but they require refrigeration. They're going to be a good product. They require refrigeration because the potency will wane with air exposure and time at room temperature. So if you have one that is refrigerated, I would recommend filling no more than 1 week at a time in a pill box or whatever you're using to measure. Or if you're disciplined enough to remember, you can take it directly from the fridge every day, but I wouldn't advise taking on more than a week at a time. I tried to include 2 specific strains in what I choose for myself. Those are Lactobacillus acidophilus and Bifidobacterium. Those are 2 that you really want to look for. These are definitely, again, advice for adults. For babies and toddlers, you might want to try B. infantis. However, please consider discussing with your pediatrician before you add anything into your baby or toddler's regimen to make sure it's appropriate for them. Another thing to consider is that if you need to be dairy-free, like we talked about before, make sure you are choosing a dairy-free formulation. So this should be obvious on the back of the box, but if you're not sure, you're going to be looking for things like lactase in the active ingredients. And if you're not sure, a great resource is to call your pharmacist or ask them if you're at the store picking it up, and they can run it through their system to confirm, because you can just tell them you have a dairy allergy and they will be able to scan it through their system. So in this case, a pharmacist is a really great resource, even though you don't technically have an allergy, but it will help them to screen it appropriately for you. You want to make sure that you have a combination product. So you don't want something that only has 1 strain. You want something that has at least the 2 that I mentioned before, and possibly more. The reason for this is that you want to promote diversity and variety in the microbiome, because the more diverse, the more functional it is in an ability to support your nutrition, your immune health, and your digestion. One specific microbe you might want to consider if you've had long antibiotic therapy is S. boulardii, S. boulardii. It's a yeast microbe, and so it's not susceptible to antibiotics, and it really can help populate and rebuild the gut flora. It's also resistant to stomach acid and body temperature and heat, so it could be a good option for you if you need to do some damage control after antibiotic use. Another option you might want to consider are spore-based probiotics. Now, spore-based probiotics are unique because they are specifically designed to be resilient against stomach acid, where many poor quality probiotics go to die before they even get to the intestines and to the gut in order to repopulate. So spore-based probiotics come from the soil and therefore can stand harsh conditions, and they actually make it to their intended destination in the gut. And lastly, remember always to start with the lowest recommended amount first and increase from there as needed. You want to work your way up slowly to avoid uncomfortable side effects like bloating or bowel habit changes. If you experience mild changes like that, it's likely that it's due to the probiotics beginning to work. Of course, if you have any acute serious changes, please discontinue them and speak with your doctor. Some brands I have personally tried and like for myself, and again, I don't get any compensation. I'm not an affiliate for these companies at all, but I do like Microbiome Labs, and I also like Pure Encapsulations. Those are both definitely high quality products that I recommend, that I've used personally and that I have found to be very successful. There is some discussion out there that you should rotate your probiotics every 6 months in order to introduce new strains. I haven't decided really. I feel like the jury's still out on that one for me. I think that if you're incorporating plenty of good prebiotic and probiotic foods along with a probiotic supplement, and you're not living in an overly sterile world, you're not taking antibiotics on a regular basis, you're probably okay to stay with the one that you're taking for a while. But as always, this is not considered to be medical advice, so please discuss with your provider before you begin or change any medications.